like to call to order the City Council study session for Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Christine Brown, City Clerk. Please state for the record if you're present after I call your name. Mayor Matthews. Present. Deputy Mayor Quitzel.
Present.
Councilmember Dietz.
Present.
Councilmember Fenton Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Present.
Councilmember Moorwalkie.
Present.
Councilmember Schneider.
Present.
Thank you.
And we also have at the dais our city manager, Blair King, and city attorney, Jim Haney. Other members of staff in the other room. I'll begin now with the land acknowledgement. Words attributed to Chief Seattle. Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. We begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is within the ancestral territory of the people of clear salt water, Suquamish people, expert fishermen, canoe builders, basket weavers. The Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea as they have for thousands of years. Here the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. And I'd like to add some words from the writer Jedediah Purdy. Land is perennially the thing we share that holds us apart. Its ownership means power for some over others, down through time. Ownership is the beginning of credit, the way to turn a modest claim on the world into a grander one. Owning nothing means having to make wealth out of your own hide. Now, let's ask for approval of the agenda. Councilmember Moorwalkie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Quitzel. I move approval of tonight's study session agenda as presented.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So ordered. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Seeing none. Our regular business. First, we'll receive a presentation and an update on the wastewater beneficial reuse project and other groundwater management work.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Public Works Director Chris Vicky will present this. Just want to remind the council that the last time you received an update on beneficial reuse of wastewater, which is what this is, was back in February. And then at that time, the council had expressed an interest in the potential for groundwater recharge through a beneficial reuse of wastewater and also the development of satellite treatment facility. In October, very recently now, you did receive a presentation on the draft groundwater management plan peer review. And the council again expressed interest in the city's efforts related to the beneficial reuse of wastewater. What we want to do is review with you that presentation from February and provide you some updates and talk about the next steps with that, and also the next steps in completing the groundwater management plan. And that will be something that will be before the council at your meeting on December the 9th. We have been looking at beneficial reuse of wastewater since 2021, when the council allocated a portion of the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds for this purpose. And again, Chris Vicky will provide you a presentation and we'll review some of the information from earlier and then update that and look at where we are incorporating the issue of recharge and the groundwater management plan.
Good evening, Council. Chris Wiersbicki, Public Works Director. See you this evening. As the City Manager mentioned, this presentation this evening will focus on our beneficial reuse and other groundwater management updates stemming from a conversation that you last had with the peer reviewer of the groundwater management plan, who expressed how groundwater recharge is a really critical component of our groundwater management action plan moving forward for the next couple of years. So we will give you a bit of a recap and update on that project, as well as information on some peripheral work that is going on around groundwater and water resources generally. We're really trying to kind of help the council and the community understand kind of the overlapping efforts we have that related to water, wastewater, stormwater, and all of our water resources. But we'll start with the beneficial reuse project. As you may remember, there are two sources of reclaimed water on Bainbridge Island. The first is the Winslow Wastewater Treatment Plant, and the second, in Winslow, we are also considering a potential satellite wastewater treatment plant, which we will talk a little bit more about in a minute, which would be a smaller facility in the upper northern part of the sewer shed. The other source of reclaimed water is down on South Island at the Fort Ward Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is currently run by Sewer District 7, but will be transferring ownership to Kitsap Public Utility District on January 1st. This presentation will not cover that plant, but that is another potential source for future work. The consultant identified two alternatives for us for reclaimed water, one using the wastewater treatment plant in Winslow and distributing sources to either recharge or reclaimed uses in the region or in the vicinity of the plant. The other was this opportunity for a satellite treatment plant in the northern part of the sewer shed that could also contribute to recharge or reclaimed water within the vicinity of that plant. The potential uses of reclaimed water are irrigation, so things like irrigating golf courses or sports fields or high-use communities, or groundwater recharge, so putting the water back into the ground. And we do have a limited assessment of the potential for groundwater recharge in the vicinity of these wastewater treatment plants. There are other, obviously, more capital-intensive uses like using that wastewater to flush toilets and as in repotable uses in commercial buildings, et cetera. But we are not exploring any of those at this time. The city does use a lot of water for irrigation, not necessarily the city itself, but city partners and other properties in the city. As you can see, just in the vicinity of the wastewater treatment plant themselves, there are quite a few parks and schools that use quite a bit of irrigation water in the summer, upwards of somewhere between 5 and 6 million gallons a year, which is quite a bit. There are also non-city water users who are using groundwater for irrigation. The Wing Point Golf Course uses, they tell us, almost 19 million gallons of water of irrigation usage a year. And then the Sands Ball Field also has a well that uses about 2 million gallons a year of irrigation. So there's quite a bit of irrigation going on in the vicinity of these plants that could potentially be supplanted with reclaimed water. The other option is to potentially put that water back into the ground. Their consultant did a desktop review of the available data for recharge potential. They created a groundwater recharge favorability map, which we'll look at in just a minute. And that map considers factors like geology and hydrogeology, the soil characteristics of the area, and slope stability and other potential characteristics of soil and hazards. The map looks like this. It's kind of complicated to look at this scale, but I do want to just highlight, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the map, you'll see a bunch of little squares in the legend, kind of blue, yellow, orange, kind of pink and purple. The pink and the purple lines are the areas with the highest potential recharge. So anywhere you see a circle that's purple or red, those are areas that have potentially high recharge capabilities. You'll notice that there are not that many red and purple circles in the greater Winslow area, which is kind of an interesting fact, I think, because that is a place where we are looking to put additional growth in the future, and it really isn't a tremendous amount of groundwater recharge potential in that area. So that I think is a good thing. There are, however, areas that in the vicinity that do have some potential for recharge. We are looking at highlighting properties that were already in public ownership, not necessarily by the city, but by the city or by parks. So the Grand Forest is one, the Johnson Farm is one, Sakai Park is one, and then we are also, and this is a new addition from the last presentation, looking at Rotary Park as another potential location as well. Going back to the alternative, so from the wastewater treatment plant, which you see in the bottom right-hand corner of the map where the little triangle is, the first alternative would look at additional treatment of wastewater from the existing plant and then distribution in the vicinity to either serve recharge or irrigation sites. The irrigation sites are the darker green areas on this map, and the light green area are the recharge sites. We looked at two potential alternatives here, and really we're trying to get a sense of scale of how much do these projects cost, what are some bookends of the low and the high end of a project of this nature, and what can we expect. Kind of the lowest tier project on this alternative is just treating the water and using it to irrigate the golf course. That's somewhere in the $6 million range. If we were to expand the distribution system and try to do additional recharge or additional irrigation farther away from the plant site or the golf course site, we'd be looking at anywhere from $19 million plus. So somewhere between $6 and $20 million. Alternative two is looking at creating an entirely new, smaller treatment plant farther north in the sewer shed. You can see the little triangle kind of in the middle right of the map. That is actually located right now in the Sakai Park vicinity. And then basically doing the same thing, distributing that reclaimed water for irrigation or recharge in the vicinity to the green or the light green areas on the map. The downside of the satellite plant, well, there's upsides and downsides. The downsides is there's a lot less water that's being generated at a plant that is further up in the sewer shed because it's treating less properties, so there's less water available. The water available equates to about maybe 2/3 of what the irrigation needs would be for the city and parks properties in the vicinity. However, it does also take some pressure off of the Winslow wastewater treatment plant because it's diverting wastewater from that plant. So there are some benefits to the wastewater plant there. The alternatives that a consultant looked at for this alternative, again, we're looking at kind of ballpark numbers, bookends. So for irrigation only and developing the plant and the distribution system, we'd be looking at somewhere around 12 million. If we were, again, expand the distribution system to look at groundwater recharge in other areas, we could be looking at anywhere from $15 million plus. So these are expensive projects. And we are not looking at creating 100% design or going to construction on these projects anytime soon, but they are part of our thinking and strategizing about how we're going to continue to address wastewater and the water usage and irrigation usage in the coming years. Summary of alternatives, again, just highlights the fact that projects range anywhere from 6 to 20 million, with the lowest cost alternative being additional treatment at the existing wastewater treatment plant in Winslow and distributing it for irrigation nearby. And again, just recapping on next steps. So we're going to continue to evaluate these specific recharge sites. We are looking at doing some hydrological work to determine what are the actual physical characteristics of some of these sites. Not all these sites are owned by the city. Some of them are owned by parks. And so there is some negotiation we have to go through to get access to these sites and work with partners to develop a project like this. We will be continuing discussions with the golf course as well. And as I mentioned earlier, kind of folding this work into our larger planning work for wastewater treatment capacity, aquifer recharge, and groundwater management plan actions. So with that, we'll just look at a couple other updates on other groundwater management work that's related. You may remember that the city received almost $800,000 grant from the state for the Manzanita Stormwater Recharge Park. This is a park that would be developed up at the M&E Farm off of the Day Road Farm area. It's kind of in the southeast corner of those properties. It is estimated that we could put about 2.2 million gallons worth of stormwater annually into the ground if this project gets built, in addition to also protecting downstream riparian areas from flash flooding, which is part of the outcomes of this project. We're also going to be next year talking to the council about efforts to coordinate water systems between the largest systems on the island, which are owned by the city and by the Kitsap Public Utility District. Coordination and consolidation of these systems could help us with water conservation and reducing impacts on surface water. This work is happening through a project that the council approved about a year ago called the Water System Business Plan, which we'll be reviewing with the Utility Advisory Committee this month and bringing to the council hopefully in the first quarter of next year. Partnering with that would be potentially an interlocal agreement to have some system interties between the KPUD and the city water systems. And again, we are looking at long-term planning for the sustainability of the city's water systems and water sources, not just for growth planning, but for the customers and the service that's available right now. And these are best practice efforts to create a more sustainable outcomes for our water systems. And then lastly, on the groundwater management plan, you know that the peer review is complete. It's on the city's website and available for folks to read. We did 4 briefings on the peer review. We did one with the council, the planning commission, the technical advisory committee, and the groundwater management subcommittee. All of those are available for viewing on the city's website. They were all a little bit different and interesting conversations, a lot of really good feedback on the plan and good comments that we had from folks on that. I think that the consultant team, Key to Waters, that you met during that discussion has really gained some credibility in the community on this topic, which is great, and they've been really good to work with. And so we are looking to maybe have them help us wrap up the groundwater management plan in the next couple of months. We are still going to ask EA Engineering, who is working on the majority of the plan, to wrap up some comments and edits that we have from this last second draft. And we're looking at a contract amendment with Key to Waters to do a little bit of additional analysis that came up in the conversations about the peer review, specifically around stream and surface water analysis, a steady state analysis, and helping us craft a final summary and recommendations on the plan, which I think will really help communicate these issues to the community in a really clear way and also help guide decisions for the city council. We are looking at additional expenditures on this that we'll bring to you in December. This is money that we already have budgeted. We're not looking for new appropriation at this time. And we did review this next steps with the subcommittee members earlier last week before bringing it to the council. They were all in support of this direction and think that this is a good way to wrap up the plan. So we're really looking forward to that. And in terms of schedule, we'll try to do this additional analysis around the end of the year in January, get the final summary content and recommendations done in February, and bring the complete document and have it adopted by the council right around the end of Q1 of next year, so that we can then proceed with our public engagement, which we've also been thinking about planning and getting folks involved in that. And I think that wraps it up. So thank you very much, and look forward to hearing your discussion on this item.
Thank you, Chris. First light that I see is Councilmember Deeds
Oh, great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
and Councilmember Morawaki after.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you, Chris, for this presentation. My question is relating to, so there's some rough estimates on costs and for those projects to be actually materialized, is there a way of monetizing these projects where perhaps let's just say a bond can be created that can fund this cost, or pay for the cost? In other words, is there a way of getting these projects to pay for themselves? So that's my question.
Councilmember Moore and Mayor Matthews.
Thank you. On the summary of alternatives table, I don't know if you have put it up, but you had the 4 options: a centralized one with irrigation to the golf course, the bigger one that would be irrigation throughout a larger recharge area, and then the decentralized satellite one, that's irrigation only, and then the satellite one with irrigation and recharge. A couple things on the less expensive one, the centralized golf course irrigation project. It says it's summer use only, and the centralized other irrigation, that's a year-round project or year-round availability to recharge. At least that was as table says. But on the other two, the decentralized, are these all both summer use, or are they all year round? I just need to have an idea of, how long these projects work. And I had one other thought. I lost my train of thought. But all the cars are empty anyway, so we'll move on.
Mayor Matthews.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thank you so much, Director Versbicki, for your presentation. I just had a quick question. In thinking about Wing Point and water and the meetings we had with them last year, Michael Goldsberry knows so much about water and our systems, but his wife Katie is the facilities or the general manager at Meadowmere. Are we also speaking to them? That was my question. And then, oh, one more. And then I was speaking to some residents at Stetson Ridge and this isn't public property, but it's a giant sort of stormwater circular area that they were saying has shown to be a high area for recharge. So just wondering about that one too. Thank you.
Councilmember Hightopoulos.
Yeah, I just wanted to express appreciation for the willingness to pivot to Kita Waters and recognition of the fact they got some traction with the community and us, and I'm really looking forward to their involvement in wrapping it up.
I guess that's all from the dais. Chris, if you have.
Yeah, Mr. Rosevic, go ahead and we can respond to that and a couple
Yep.
other, we can expand on that as well.
Sure. First question was about how to pay for these projects. That's a good question. There are pricey projects, and as you know, we just did float a bond for both water and sewer improvements to cover the next 5 years worth of improvements that are in the plan. As I mentioned, these projects are quite a few years out still. To build a satellite plant, to look at additional treatment at the plant, at the wastewater plant is probably a post 5-year, 6-year effort. Certainly bonds could be used to support it. Ultimately, the ratepayers are the ones who are probably going to foot the bill for this, although there are probably also opportunities for the general fund to contribute to the effort, depending on the types of end products we're looking at, whether we're looking at irrigation and groundwater recharge, things like that. But they are expensive projects, and that's why we are kind of thinking about them holistically with all the other projects that we have and trying to figure out how to do long-term planning with these costs in mind. That's kind of the point here. Yeah. In terms of the projects and their year-round or seasonability, there's a bunch of different variables that play into this, right? Because on the one hand, the treatment plant sees higher flows during the wintertime, but there's less opportunity for irrigation in the wintertime. There's lower flows in the summertime, but that's the times when you need to have the irrigation. On the flip side, recharge, probably maybe not in all locations, but in some locations can happen all year round. So it really, the seasonality of the projects really depends on which option we choose and whether or not we are, and what we plan on doing with the product, whether we're putting it in the ground, whether we're trying to reuse it. But ultimately, the alternatives are designed so that we are trying to take the maximum advantage of both of those things, right? That using as much flow in the times when we can, and then making sure that in the summer that there are still other opportunities for supplementing those systems if we're starting to rely on them when we're doing heavy irrigation during dry periods. On the Meadowmere system, we have not looked at Meadowmere only because of the distance from these sources. However, we are thinking about Meadowmere water system in terms of how to coordinate that, which is probably the third largest water system on the island, how to coordinate that system along with the systems that the city and Kitsap Public Utility District own. So that will be part of our larger kind of connectivity and efforts related to the water systems, but probably not for irrigation at this point. And then lastly, Stetson Ridge, that is interesting because I was looking at the same thing on the map. That's one of the challenges of the map, is that the groundwater recharge areas are not always areas that are available for recharge. They are potentially developed. There's, restrictions on the site or things like that. So we've really been focusing on public properties. Interesting that we've started to look at the Rotary Park site. One of the things that's happening at Rotary, if you're looking at the map on the east side of Weaver is actually where the park is. On the west side of Weaver, there's a development and there are some stormwater facilities on that side of the street that serve the nearby residential district there. The location of that stormwater facility is actually in an area where there is potentially some high recharge capability. So that has got a consultant and the staff team thinking a little bit more about how we're using our stormwater facilities. We have a lot of stormwater ponds and stormwater management facilities around the island. We should probably also start looking at potential overlaps in these locations. If there are places that we could potentially put additional water into stormwater facilities during the dry season and allow it to recharge in the ground when it's not being used for stormwater. This is something that's being done in other communities, and we really haven't explored it here yet. But the Rotary Park site is one of the first places we'll start looking at that. And I think that's all the questions.
Something else occurs to me. You mentioned the interlocal agreement as a future project with Kitsap PUD. Is that a process that's already underway and just taking its time, or do you have a sense?
It is. We are in discussions with the district now about, we have not crafted an ILA yet, but we are planning to have those discussions probably early in the year.
Yeah.
We already have some potential opportunities where interties between the systems might make sense. And as you probably remember from the discussions we've had about the groundwater management plan, one of the management actions we are looking at doing is trying to spread out as much as possible the production of groundwater and groundwater extraction, because we have a lot of concentration in the area around the Sands, head of the Bay area in the Fletcher Bay Aquifer. And so the more, not necessarily that we're going to be using more water, but that we can spread out the extraction of water across different aquifers and relieve pressure in different areas, and also preserve, environmental systems at the same time. So that's why I say that regardless of the growth that we see around our water systems, that is a good best practice that we should be looking at long term.
Councilmember Fantroy Johnson and Councilmember Itopoulos, did you have a? Yeah, okay.
I wanted to ask you, how does the personal wells that people have, how do that play into our water systems? Are we going to be, is that a separate plan or?
Well, right now, we don't have a whole lot of information about individual wells. We know where they are, but we don't have much information on usage. And so one of the things the groundwater management plan recommends is getting in touch with people who have individual wells and seeing if they will allow us to monitor them so that we can learn about the water levels in the different systems that they are extracting water from, and learn about usage and be able to have a better, more data for the overall system. In addition to that, the water system business plan, one of the things that it is doing is looking at concentrations of smaller party well systems that have 2 or 3 people on them as opposed to like 25 or more. There are areas in the city where there are concentrations of these small systems, and our experience and the experience that KPUD is also having is that slowly these systems are being turned back, or there's a desire for them to be managed by other agencies rather than just individuals who are being served by the systems themselves. People are retiring, they're getting older, the systems are getting older, and they don't want to take care of them. They want someone else to take care of them. And this is a challenge because we don't always have infrastructure in the place where these systems exist. And so serving them, like the Ferncliff area that we just recently served last year, is a good example of this, when that just happened to be near infrastructure. But there are other systems that are not near infrastructure. And so we need to start thinking about, if we're going to expand the water system to serve new areas of the community, how do we prioritize that so that we are serving potentially smaller water clusters of smaller water systems that could become water customers and could afford to extend the water system to them and then serve them at some point?
Thank you.
Councilmember Itopoulos and then city manager.
Yeah, so.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about asking a question that may just be too big to ask, but the timeliness is important. And that is just sort of how to connect this to sewer capacity. So, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about, and it's a controversial issue, when we will need a new sewer plant, and some of us don't believe that we should expand beyond the sewer plant. But the existing sewer plant, but at some point we will need to, even potentially with the growth the minimal growth that we have. So the point being, as much as groundwater recharge is important, obviously additional capacity created by this is, and I'm just wondering, is it possible, and it's obviously not gonna be vast, but like when you look at the satellite plant, and if it's gonna be putting out whatever it was, if I'm reading this correctly, potentially 60, it would be, does this mean that it could inject 67,000 gallons per day somewhere? Like, okay, so can we divide that by 100 gallons per day and estimate that that's approximately 670 more residents that in residential uses that we get? No, it's not near you. So are we looking at that after all that? So this is right before all of us. It'll be before the planning commission, all of us, as people are making decisions out of concern that there isn't capacity. is this an avenue towards some additional capacity? And then if we look at it that way and the cost of a new plant versus this, is that actually a good deal for that additional capacity?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the reasoning behind this planning work. It is still, however, fairly far out in the future. You know, we are looking at, we are presently making upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant that we think are going to serve us for the next 12 to 15 years. And we probably have one more upgrade within the footprint of the plant within another 10-year period. However, when this upgrade is finished and we determine once we start seeing, if we're seeing more rapid growth, if we're seeing more connections to the plant in the next 5 to 7 years, this would be a time to understand more about what's happening with this planning work, because that will be an opportunity to say, okay, if we need to make it if we're seeing more rapid growth and we need to make a decision about the next investment, what is the right path? Is it to create more capacity at the existing plant? Is it to look at a satellite plant? How are they related? What are the cost trade-offs? And so, yes, it's early planning work, but it is related to the long-term thinking about how to treat, not just how to put water back in the ground, but how to serve sewer customers as well.
Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You raised a point that just got me curious, where there's a lot of individual wells out there, and some of those well users would prefer not to have to manage their own small well systems, and therefore presumably would get connected to a larger city well or KPUD or whatever. I have some assumptions that are probably wrong, that these, individual residential wells are probably tapping into shallower sources of water. And therefore, should we be careful about consolidating water users into our general system? Is there a benefit to avoid using, the deeper aquifers? There's a similar question with septic versus sewer, right? Where maybe septic is in fact recharging, as opposed to flushing it all down one eventual pipe and cleaning it all up and dumping it out into the sound or whatever we end up doing with it. What do we know or think we know about smaller well systems as a more sustainable or less sustainable version of what happens with the bigger systems?
Yeah. If I was channeling our groundwater management experts, they would probably say that having diversity of extraction of groundwater is probably the best long-term picture, if that's something that is possible. So, having a mix of being able to use deeper and shallower aquifers makes sense if we can do that. However, shallow aquifers also are more volatile. And so that is part of the reason why I think folks who are on shallow wells and a lot of residential wells tend to be shallower rather than very deep wells, although there are some medium to deep wells that were privately owned. They tend to be interested in connecting to the system because of the volatility of the system and the unknown about the long-term future. In addition, you mentioned, contribution from septic systems and shallow wells interact with each other, and not necessarily in a good way, right? There is a long-term benefit of putting water back into the ground from septic systems. Our groundwater model does take into account, it anticipates, or it makes an analysis of how much potential recharge is going back in the ground from septic systems, and it's significant. But that water really is important for reaching the long-term or the deeper aquifers, because by that point, most of the contaminants have been filtered out of it. When septics and shallow systems are interfacing, that's when you have potential, again, issues with water quality and that sort of thing. And again, another reason why residential users are more probably interested in connecting to a system so that they can have a more consistent, regular source without having to worry about quality or availability, or putting their system on a generator when the power goes out and that sort of thing. So we in the long term, yes, I think we are looking at trying to consolidate smaller systems as much as possible, but we are also in the shorter term really just trying to get more information, more data about which aquifers are these wells tapping into, how much water are they using, is there volatility, and are there issues that we can foresee? The more information we can get about them, the better. And so that is part of our groundwater management program, and one of the actions we'll be putting forward as part of this next budget, for the next biennial budget, is money to go and do that. Reach out to people, try to get more information from individual folks about how they use water.
Thank you.
Manager?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, before we went on to the next topic, I just was thinking I wanted to review with the council what the council's thinking was, as I recall, in 2021 when you decided to use ARPA funds to take a look at beneficial reuse. At that time, we talked to you that treated wastewater is a valuable commodity, and that maybe we looked at doing something different than discharging our treated wastewater out into the gooey deck bed in Puget Sound. And the council authorized that we go ahead and take a look. So we've been engaging in long-term planning and taking a look at what uses there are. In October, when we brought the groundwater management plan to you, some of you expressed an interest or had toured the Port Gamble wastewater treatment facility that has a recharge capability with that. And that's something that, again, we wanted to remind you that we have been looking at that potential for recharge capability. The dynamics of cost can change over time. Right now, probably makes it difficult to pencil out. But if we were to receive some type of notice about the strength of our nitrates in terms of discharge into Puget Sound, that may give us more incentive to look for another alternative method to use the treated wastewater, or as it was discussed, a scalping plant or a satellite plant that extracts some of the effluent, treats it, uses it for recharge, would provide some capacity, but we'd probably have to look at the cost benefit of doing that. So this is still all long-range projections, but it's based upon the premise that treated wastewater is something that we don't want to let go to waste. And so we'll continue to look at that, but I think that basic premise that this is something that's valuable, and we say that with an absolute straight face, this is something valuable and something that we want to figure out how we can use it to our benefit in the future, because at some point in time, it's possible, I'm not saying it will, but it's possible the financial dynamics will change. And what seems like a stretch financially will become more realistic as different costs shift.
It occurs to me, I'd like to make a kind of a closing comment on this discussion, but reflecting on 4 years on the council as, among other things, liaison to the Utility Advisory Committee. That has made me aware of just how much work has gone into various aspects of our water supply, water management, and all of these things related to water. People are anxious about water, but they're not paying enough attention to all the work that has gone into management, improved understanding, planning ahead. This is an area where the city has achieved a great deal. In some other areas, I'm more frustrated with the slow pace and the unsettled nature of some of our planning. But I've got to give a lot of credit to Public Works staff and leadership there, and citizens as well who have been involved in this process. It's something that we can take a lot of satisfaction from. Let's move on then to the next item on the agenda, strategies for subsidized affordable housing production. We have a presentation, and the city manager will start us off.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this item was brought to the council, or the council decided to bring this item, starting off with a suggestion from Councilmember Schneider to have a discussion of affordable housing strategies. This presentation is specifically about subsidized affordable housing strategies. It is not about the 625 project, although that project will be referenced as a point of comparison and a reference point. You know, at this point in Washington, the majority of affordable housing that's built is subsidized to lower the development cost to allow it to be affordable. What we want to do with this presentation is provide a foundation of information for future discussions for the council about strategies to provide affordable housing. So we have asked our affordable housing expert, Tori Laughlin Taylor, who is a past member of the Washington State Affordable Housing Board. She is the former chief operating officer of Bellwether Housing, a nonprofit affordable housing developer. I was reading a little bit of information that she has credited herself with bringing billions of dollars into affordable housing in the Pacific Northwest and producing over 1,000 units of permanently affordable housing. Tori has a presentation. Again, we are focusing on subsidized affordable housing strategies, although we can talk briefly about other strategies as well. And then when we conclude with this, we are going to suggest that if the council wishes to continue this discussion, that the next steps perhaps be a review of the housing scorecard related to the adopted 2024 Housing Action Plan. We had previously brought to you an update of the implementation of that, and that has not occurred recently and probably overdue. But with that, if we can have Tori Laughlin Taylor will make your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, the city manager, and hello, greetings to the mayor and city council. I hope you said millions and not billions of dollars. Was that my hearing?
Your bio
But
said
I
billions.
wish it were so, but I would say millions. So anyway, it was a lovely introduction, and I just am here to basically help outline the key strategies available to you as a jurisdiction and trying to leverage more affordable housing in your community. Clearly, housing affordability is a fundamental threat to the economic health of almost every community, actually, in Western Washington, and Bainbridge Island has some particular circumstances that heighten the challenge here. And I think you've all have first-hand familiarity with that. And I know there's widespread support for addressing housing affordability on the island in order to protect the economic diversity that you've had historically here. Overall purpose today is just to frame the key strategies available to local jurisdictions to achieve affordability. And we'll touch on how that's being applied in recent and anticipated pipeline projects on Bainbridge. Together with your city staff, we've gathered relevant background information for Bainbridge, most of which you've seen before. And so we'll be just sort of snapshotting it here. Relevant housing funding sources, housing development opportunities and how it's been applied, and how they support the goals for housing production at different income levels. So the challenge is a huge one for communities everywhere. I won't sugarcoat that. And we'll plan to reserve most of your time just to talk about the possible ways that the city can improve its tools and build on those opportunities for housing. Can we get the next slide? Is there an advancer that I don't know about? Thanks. Great. Oh, sorry. Go back. I'm going the wrong way. It's backwards. Thank you. Sorry, I should have gotten a primer on this first. So as you know, in recognition that housing is critical for every community's health, state seeks to stimulate appropriate housing to meet the needs across the state through the Growth Management Act, and requiring every jurisdiction have an housing action plan, which you have a fine one. And it presumes that every jurisdiction takes responsibility to stimulate more housing at the income levels that are determined needed in their community. And specifically with House Bill 1220 in 2021, the state legislature more specifically instructs local governments to plan for and accommodate at the spectrum of income levels. And so what you see in this slide is this income levels, ribbons of income levels that are defined in 1220. This chart is directly pulled from your planning department. They maintain it and shows the estimated housing supply on Bainbridge as of 2020, when Department of Commerce identified those, and the allocation of new housing needed to be created over the next 25 years, again, divided into the ribbons of affordability. We obviously know that achieving these targets is a huge challenge. So in terms of strategies for producing affordable housing, essentially 3 key elements all have to come into play. Call them 3 legs of the stool. You need a place to build it, land close enough to where people work and live, zoning authorization to build at, I will say, in a form that is going to be cost effective to achieve that housing. And that means generally higher density. And then subsidized capital, because despite the other tools, there is a capital gap when it comes to affordability between what people can afford and the cost of a project financed and constructed. We talk a lot about the individual legs of the stool. No one achieves what you need, particularly when you're getting into subsidized, inherently when you get into subsidized housing. In terms of what tools the city does have to impact these 3 legs, you've got public land. And that can be ideal as a precipitant to affordable housing development, because public facilities, one, are often well located in a community to make them appropriate for housing and mixed uses. And obviously, when the land is owned, that's another resource that you can bring to the table. But beyond that value of the obvious value of the land and lightening the load on the project, I would stress that the influence that confers on you as a city is really key, because you have control over what gets developed, and you can often achieve multiple public benefits in that way beyond just the housing. And finally, land endures. It may be invested in a project, but that project eventually will outlive itself. And that means the land remains with the public entity, and it can become its next act, can live into its next act. And then on policy side, land use policy, your zoning maps obviously need to support appropriate density to build more housing where you want it and where it can be done cost effectively. And parking policy, as you know from all these conversations, is a key part of that discussion, because the more alternatives you can provide to structured parking, which has become crazy expensive, the more capital is left to help with the housing itself. And I'll also stress there that something that's often overlooked, but the clarity of policy and the permitting process, the predictability of that is really key in getting what you want, because that removes risk for the developer. It ensures that the developers you want to work with are wanting to work with you. And of course, if the more risk that's there and uncertainty, the more cost ends up in the project. And then, of course, the third leg and the most critical one is the capital to fill the gap. I'm sorry to say that since over the course of the decades, the federal government has largely backed away from its full commitment to housing. And that means that states and local jurisdictions have had to step in. So you're back to depending on your strong tax base to support seed capital, but then you want to use that to leverage it to the max to access what other sources there are out there. And that's what we'll be talking about. So not to put too bad a point on, but leverage is key. And to stretch your dollars, you want to prioritize the projects will attract the most outside capital.
Deputy Mayor, if I may, I think you've been speaking to the next slide, just there now. We just seen it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just gives you a little bit more detail on that. So those are the legs of the strategy. You need to maximize all 3 of those tools to get the best bang for your buck. So in terms of the progress against the 1220 targets, aside from the 625 project, which is just in planning, there are currently 3 affordable housing projects in the pipeline that have achieved all 3 of those elements and are moving forward. Finch Green, to be built as affordable home ownership, made possible because Housing Resources Bainbridge, its use of its role as a land trust has been really key there. And thanks to the land being donated by Bethany Lutheran Church. The second phase of Wintergreen townhouses, where again, HRB is acquiring additional 14 units out of a total 73 unit project to hold within their land trust for home buyers. So both those projects are for 80% or under, all people who are ready and able to buy. And then the Erickson Apartments, which HRB is developing specifically for affordable housing, and that gets to a little deeper need and as rental. The past 5 years, there are additional 2, the Oliver, where HRB was able to buy down affordability in 13 of the units of that private development. And those are at being made available at the rental affordability level. So between under 50 and under 80% median, as I understand it, in the latest plan. And then the first phase of Wintergreen, where I believe it was 17 units were provided.
Pardon me, if I could interject on current projects. How about the Bethany Lutheran project? Oh,
Sorry, yeah.
yeah, great. Thank
I know.
Thank you, colleagues.
I had to
I forget.
create myself a little chart of these changing names.
Okay,
Yeah.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we know that real estate development has a long lead time, and affordable housing additionally so, because you have to add the time to compete for the financing that is constrained. And therefore it goes through competitive public processes, and sometimes those competitions take 2 years to win. So this timeline just represents, by way of example, a low-income housing tax credit funded project on public land that also needs significant state funding. So essentially the model that we do have at 625 Winslow. You add up the pre-development work, time to compete for the financing, maybe a second round of financing, and closing on financing and building out. You basically have 7 years from the time you initiate, you identify the project as a possibility, and when we can move in people. So I'm going to fly through this because it just really illustrates with a little bit more specificity the opportunities that the city has with the 3 legs of the strategy of the stool. The land, when the city controls the land, you call the shots and you call it hold the cards, which is tremendously valuable. And locational efficiency is really key in identifying for affordable housing. I'll say too that holding, I think I mentioned it, but being able to choose to work with developers who are not looking for market return on investment is a key part of keeping that cost down. To go to policy, obviously ensuring that you've got plenty of well-located land that's zoned for higher density. The most cost-effective way to build is going to generally be to align with the building codes. So get as close in density and height as you're willing and able to go to what would be allowed under building codes. That's where your greatest efficiency is going to be. And we've already spoken about how when the city holds an interest in the project or the land, it provides more opportunity to facilitate public interest uses above and beyond just the housing. So pedestrian level opportunities to enhance your public environment and the common good. On the capital side, this just illustrates why the low-income housing tax credit, which is the major remaining source of federal support for social housing or affordable housing in the United States, is so important in a project that can compete and meet the requirements of that program. You're talking about the financing that brings is like 60% of the capital needs of the project. So you really can't walk away from that. So really looking and strategizing so that you can access that as a resource is really key in providing new rental affordable housing in the United States. I just wanted to acknowledge and remind you, this is in your packet, this piece that we put together a couple years ago, and it really is just demonstrating, was looking at capital leverage for several proposed or tried approaches to affordable housing on Bainbridge, and demonstrating the difference in leverage of those different approaches. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to revisit it with you. I wouldn't say it's now, you know, slightly stale information, but the fundamentals haven't changed in terms of the illustration that it creates. So in terms of your seed funding and how you best leverage it, this is a snapshot of the tracking sheet that that Laura maintains of the Housing Trust Fund dollars and funds and funds out and where they go. You were fortunate, well, I should say the collective, we were fortunate in having a few years ago the benefit of the ARPA funds, which really gave a shot in the arm, particularly in your case. Looking forward, we have to be aware that there's really only about $900,000 coming in to the Housing Trust Fund for the city of Bainbridge Island on an ongoing basis, unless some other resources are looked to. And so that brings us back to this chart, full circle. This is a chart maintained by the planning department, as I mentioned, that tracks progress against the 1220 goals. And you'll see the challenge of producing under 50%. Huge kudos to Housing Resources Bainbridge for the Erickson project, where they have been successful. Well, one, to the donors who provided the land, and then in their competing for some key sources, and one of them being those 7 vouchers that provide ongoing affordability for those 7 families that stay with the property and fill the gap between their income and what the rent is that sustains the project. So that's a huge one. Those are tough projects to do. The next sector is where you would find affordable homeownership projects and low-income housing tax credit projects. So their 625 Winslow is being counted there as a planned project, and it shows you the relative numbers of the different projects. For the higher income levels, I just want to note that there's a tacit assumption that the market will take care of those, but that won't happen still without the policy influences and such that you have in the land, and ensuring that you've got enough of the zoning, and of course what we were just talking about in terms of water capacity. And then finally, just mentioned that those two, the 80 to 100 and the 100 to 120, those numbers, presumptions are taken from the DEIS of numbers of ADUs that might be produced at those levels. So those also are speculative and would be presumed to be provided by the market, in that case, very privately probably, and will probably take more encouragement, whether through policy or something else, to produce. So I believe that sort of sets out the parameters of the strategy, all of which I know you've heard before, and I thank you for your patience in hearing it again, but available for questions, and wanted to get into whatever discussion you would like to have regarding the
I want to
Housing Action Plan.
open it to everyone. I have a bunch of things maybe at the end, but who was first? Councilmember Deeds first, and then Councilmember Hitopoulos and Morawaki.
Yeah, just a quick question relating to the ADUs. So there was a slide with, I think 94 ADUs,
Yeah.
or maybe on 2 different income levels. Do we have any information of like how many ADUs have actually been approved?
Do we?
So we know how we're doing on AD. Of course, we just came out with the, the pre-approved option, but I'm just curious, how are we doing on the ADU front?
Well, we can look at some of that information. Why don't you ask the question? Because obviously we don't have the answer right now.
Yeah, we'll follow up.
Mhm.
And that's not an aspect that I was directly involved.
But, I mean, we'll look for it
We'll-
while
Yeah.
you talk.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to make a couple comments that I didn't want to trouble Tori with, but I might ask one question that I don't know if I want to know the answer to, but I think I know the answer to. And that is that when you talk about one of the things we need to identify property, we need to own the properties, we need to buy it or
It's
have
very
them,
helpful
whatever.
to own the property.
But a big issue for us, as we go into the comp plan and regulations thereafter is going to be the idea of upzoning and what we upzone and the idea that that is going to generate affordable housing. So when we're talking about the tiers that we've been focused on tonight, which are going to be subsidized, then I guess what I would ask you is, wouldn't it be the case that we don't necessarily need to upzone areas and assume those are going to be where we're going to build? Because after all, we better own the properties or know that we're going to build. But in fact, we could have bonus density that was dramatic.
Conditional
that-
upzoning.
That allowed us to
essentially,
that we could take advantage then as landowners in the future, as long as it covers areas that we would own or do own. In other words, it's
Yeah,
not.
there are,
it's
there
not
are,
just-
there are a number of, there are tools and the way, or the way it's addressed in Seattle is the MHA program, where you get certain density bonuses if you achieve affordability there and include it in the project. Yeah. So that's an opportunity. It doesn't, I will say there's still, there's a capital gap to get there. So it can get you, it can ensure the opportunity. Yeah.
Councilmember Morawaki,
Thought you had something.
or
No,
is that?
no, go ahead.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to
Go ahead.
call on me again.
Yeah.
I do want to make a comment, which again, it's not, I'm kind of whatever, piggybacking on Tori's presentation, but we don't have a lot of opportunities to talk about this stuff. And I'm sure that's why
Yeah.
the deputy mayor has things to say. And the fact is that this came up because Councilmember Schneider asked to talk about strategies for tiers. And what I want to point out, especially in light of the memorandum that was sent to us yesterday, when we look at the tiers we were just looking at, we're looking at a gap of, I think the chart showed 922 units, and I think it's actually 100, it's actually 1055. I was playing with the math and it wasn't working, but let's 1055.
If you include the emergency housing, you mean?
I just used the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
The numbers across the bottom. And 965 of the units across the bottom are going to wind up needing to be subsidized housing. That leaves us with a 90 unit gap that we have to be looking at other strategies for besides outright subsidy. And so I just want to point out to the council, with all the noise that's going on in those motions that we were given in our that were sent to us yesterday, saying that the planning commission was supposedly going to be making motions for 3.0 FAR in 2 districts, 55-foot heights, six stories in one area. These are all potentially on the table, and what I'm hearing is not from staff, not from planning commission, but those were actually written by staff at the recommendation of the consultants, are wildly out of whack with needing to figure out how to get 90 units that we're not going to have to build ourselves. So I'm sorry for taking the moment to put this on the table, but given what we were saying yesterday and what the planning commission is going to be talking about this week, and the fact that I believe my colleague really wanted us to be able to start talking before it's too late about strategies, I just have to make that observation.
Councilmember Morawaki and then Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thanks for your comments, Councilmember Itopoulos. It is important to look down the road. I just had a quick question on the opportunities, how far we're to get this. The post 2020 known build, and I'm on the Kitsap Housing Authority, and we have a proposed project in status of Southern Cross, which is going to be at least 4 apartments. And it's made some news, but there's been a donation from a generous Bainbridge Island donor of a former childcare daycare center. That's going to be at least 3 units, and they're not, that's only 7. It's not a huge hit, but it is 7. That's as much as Erickson's going to do for 30%. So I'm just wondering why those
Yeah.
weren't considered as part of in the pipeline projects there. Yeah.
Is this a project that I'm not? We know where we're with that project?
Primarily because
I think one of them is not affordable. What is the first one you said, that housing resources?
Yeah.
I didn't
There's-
actually hear the name.
Yeah, there's a authority, the Kitsap Housing Authority.
Uh-huh.
Kitsap Housing Authority, there's a development called Southern Cross on the south end of the island.
That's,
And it's a 4-plex, it will be affordable housing rentals. And then just up Cave Avenue, there's a former daycare center that was just recently purchased that will be at least 3 affordable housing apartments.
The housing on, not the daycare.
No, excuse me? It was a
The
former
former
daycare.
being converted. to
Yeah,
housing.
right.
Got it.
Yeah, but it's 7 and that helps add to the total, even though it's not from our sources.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not familiar with it.
Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to say. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get this out in a reasonable way. So I did want this session to be about strategies for how we, meet this of our bands of affordability. And for right now, I want to focus on the higher end of affordability. And I think this is a bit in response to what my colleague Kirsten Hitopoulos is referring to. So I'm looking at the greater than 80%, 80, so which is 80 to 100%, and then 100 to 120, and then over 120. And so if you add those 3 together, you get 838 units. Now, I know that immediately folks will say, yes, but we have market rate capacity in the conservation areas. And so I want to address that. I think that what we could do is we could take the pressure off of the conservation areas. I mean, this would be new housing. This would be, greenfield housing in the conservation areas. And if there is pressure on Bainbridge Island to grow, and it's not a lot of pressure, we're not growing very fast, but whatever pressure is there, if we only have, market rate available in that area, then that's where it's going to go. Now, I've also been told today that, yes, we do have some market rate capacity, in the Winslow area. So I just want you to know that I'm taking that into consideration. What I would like to explore with my colleagues is an idea of casting a wider net for that would be inclusionary zoning, but with the idea that the wider net that we create is, it's going to create this theoretical capacity that is more than any of us can probably stomach. And so what I'm wondering is, could we then put into our strategy, but yeah, we don't let it go that far. We only let it go as far as we want it to go.
First come, first served approach. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And that at a certain point, we just stop the number of permits that we're going to allow.
I'm looking at your city
So
attorney.
this is a strategy that I really want an answer to, because I think that this changes everything. If we can determine how many permits we actually use. I'm sorry? If I was told today that, well, Leslie, there's a capacity of 500 units in the Winslow area, and that's good. I hope that maybe they get built, but maybe they're never going to get built because those owners don't want to build, right? So if we cast a wide net and we say, all right, we're going to make sure that there's mandatory inclusionary zoning in any of these new units that we are creating new capacity for. And let's say that it's 20%, but that 20% could be, anything under 120 AMI and below, right? And then we can layer on the incentives. We can say, look, you get a little additional capacity if you do rentals because we really need rentals, on and on. We can have those conversations, right? But if we do, I'm going to just call it, for lack of better wording right now, a blanket overlay zone that says, here are the rules, but we're only going to allow X number of permits to get pulled on this, and then we're going to close it off. So is that a possibility? And if so, it feels to me like that, that changes a lot. We could start to put more capacity in the lower dense areas of Winslow, which is where maybe developers would want to develop more because they can develop without doing structured parking and without elevators and whatnot. And so they're more likely to maybe want to build there, right? And it might also allow the innovative co-ops and whatnot, where, you might have somebody living in a suite, but not an actual unit, but they own. So anyway,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that this stuff gets built, right? And so is it possible to put a lid on the number of actual permits that come out?
Yeah, that is a question we can either try to
City
take a little
attorney.
bit from the dais with the city attorney,
I wouldn't be
or
able to
give you a
speak to
more
that.
thoughtful response by giving you some time.
Mhm.
Well, let me try to address it a little bit at this point, but I'll tell you that in the time I've had to look at it, since your email this afternoon, I haven't reached a definitive conclusion as to how we might do. But let me just tell you, first of all, your email this afternoon, which kind of outlined this potential for an overlay zone with inclusionary zoning, mandatory inclusionary zoning, some incentives, and then the permit limitations, it raised three questions in my mind. Two of them I think are easily answered. First, can you do an overlay zone? Yes, obviously you can. And you can, as long as you have a rationale for it, and as long as it doesn't conflict with your comprehensive plan or with the Growth Management Act, an overlay zone is perfectly fine as a means of trying to designate areas in which you wish to have higher density. Second question that it raised in my mind was, what about mandatory inclusionary zoning? And the idea is that, yes, the Growth Management Act does allow you, as a part of a upzoning of property, to impose a minimum number of dwelling units that would have to be at affordability levels in order to take advantage of that zoning. So the answer is yes, you can do mandatory zoning. You also have the ability under the GMA to do incentivized zoning and do voluntary incentives. Your third question about, and the most important question you're raising, is can you place some sort of limit on permits? And the answer is, I think, not entirely clear, but I am skeptical based on the cases that are out there. In the early 2000s, Kirkland, no, it wasn't Kirkland, I'm sorry, it was Sammamish, attempted to put in a growth cap on the number of permits for dwelling units. And they based that growth cap on their growth targets, their allocated growth, and said,
okay, over the next several years, we're going to allow so many permits per year. And that's how we'll get to the number of units that we have been allocated, and we won't let things go beyond. And the growth board said no to that, and invalidated that, said that, just because you meet your growth targets doesn't mean that you've met the Growth Management Act's requirement to encourage urban growth within your urban growth areas. And so they said no. Now, I think as we all know, the council can make decisions and revise zoning at any time. So if you were
Yeah.
to look at the number of permits that were being issued for dwelling units and at some point decide that you've met your growth targets and you've met what you need to meet, you could at some point change the zoning in the future if you monitored those permits. But having an automatic, this is the only amount of units that we are going to allow, even though the underlying zoning allows many more than that, is probably not valid. Again, I haven't researched it totally. I'm primarily aware of the Sammamish case because another of my clients, not Sammamish, back in the day, looked at the same type of issue, trying to do it. And we concluded, based on the Sammamish case, that we weren't able to do that. But we can certainly look at other strategies to try to achieve perhaps the same result, just not in the same manner that you're talking.
If I could follow up. So I think in one regard, we are trying to meet our growth management targets by doing this, right? So the intent would be not to have a certain allocation per year, but just to say that when we met our growth allocation targets, we would then be cutting off growth. And I mentioned sewer, I think in the email that I sent to you, we could decide, if there were water or sewer or whatever methods that would be helpful to sort of justify the cutting off of permits. And also, so this idea came from Joe Tovar in one of our one-on-one conversations. And so I've been wanting to follow up on it ever since. And so I don't know if he has specific examples of where this has been done, but I think it would be worth it for us to follow up if my colleagues agree, because I see the biggest problem is that if you limit if we limit our density offerings to just the exact number that, or the exact areas, that's not necessarily the place where we're going to find owners who want to develop, whether it's affordable housing or otherwise. Okay, I'll stop there, but I am just impressed by the fact that we need to take some pressure off of the conservation area. And if we have people who are kind of feeling stuck with their big home in the conservation area and they want to move to Winslow, or maybe they need to sell and move to a more affordable place, if they don't really have the options to do that, then that unit won't become available. And then that unit is not for sale to another family who wants to come in. And so it's just putting more pressure on actually developing the conservation area. And I think that is something that we obviously, want to address as well. Thank you.
And I would just say that, again, the answers to those first two questions I raised, I think are absolutely clear. the answer to the last question about how you control the number of permits and the number of dwelling units and how that relates to your growth targets is less clear in my mind. And as I say, your email came in at 1:30 this afternoon. I left to get here a little after 3, so I've had limited time to take a look at it and would be happy to look at it further and provide a more definitive answer. And perhaps some strategies to achieve the same result within the confines of the Growth Management Act. So,
Yeah.
and
And
happy
as
to consult with Mr. Tovar if he is still in fact available and not sailing off into the sunset as we speak. So, thank you.
And practically speaking, I will say that your first point is so well taken that you can, I mean, and it's demonstrated in other jurisdictions where you put an intended a zoning a plan in place that to incentivize certain things, but you're not going to have anywhere near full uptake on it, and so you have to cast the wider net, as you say. And practically speaking, you as the city attorney has said, you have lots of other opportunities down the road to manage that forward, but it doesn't happen overnight, and so it's not like you're going to have everybody screaming in and doing it overnight.
Councilmember, Mayor Matthews next, and then I have a few things I want to add to the hopper here.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. First, thank you so much, Tori, for
Gosh.
being with us again. It's always wonderful to see you. So I come from a planning commission background, I guess a few years on the planning commission where this sort of interface and discussion was pretty much what we did. And so even though I think your slides showed how long we've been having this conversation, that some of the data even seems stale, even though we've been having this conversation for ages, this actually feels like the first night that we're actually talking. And so it is really encouraging just to hear strategies and thoughts and folks, throwing the ball around a little bit. And so this is how the work's going to get done. And it's really inspiring to see it and be part of it. So that's one thing. And then just to follow up a little bit on the ADU, even though I know that's not part of your scope, is I was in the KRCC meeting today, and that's where the ADU plans came out of. And Bremerton was saying that they have had so far 8 building permits submitted for their ADUs. And so I was wondering if at some point we could get that data for here as well. Thank you, Tori. And thank you, Councilmember Schneider, for this strategy. It's really good.
It's just kind of a scattering of different responses to a very detailed and fascinating presentation. Early on, you used a good expression, speaking of Bainbridge, with circumstances that heighten the challenge. It's hard to do things in Seattle. It's harder here because the scale is so different and the terrain is so different. And I've been worried sick for years now about making some actual progress and figuring out a strategy, a methodology, and putting the pieces together. We are still really struggling with a very challenging, a wicked problem that's specific to our circumstances. And people in the community are on both sides of every issue.
It's every
at
community.
odds with the council because, or with the planning commission, as the case may be, and so on. It's really a pickle. Various things sort of jump out at me. You use the phrase, "What is the best bang?" And I want to think in terms of several different ways of defining what we're after, what our priorities are. Is the best bang in terms of the number of units we can create in a limited amount of time? Is the best bang in terms of meeting as fully as possible, as fast as possible, the goals that have been set by the county, the House Bill 1220 obligations? Or should we think in terms of trying to define the highest priority community needs and focus on those? Should we focus on gaining community acceptance by focusing on, this is what we all agree that we need? And should we focus on creating lasting community assets by getting the best design possible in a way that is pleasing to neighbors, pleasing to the general public, because the city is looking better, there's a feeling any development is going to make things worse. And we've got to overcome that apprehension, that anxiety, by bringing the best design possible. And I don't know how we do that, but that's part of my sort of agenda for a package of aspirational goals. When I look at the status, the grid with the numbers of units of various kinds of different projects, we have the potential for a 90-unit project. But generally speaking, we're talking about projects that are between 10 and 20 units.
I mean, in past projects that have been achieved.
And the question I would put to you is, where should our focus be? Are we always going to be behind if we only think small?
Yes.
That's, I kind of expected that response, and I'm still not buying into it.
I think the key point I was trying to make is that in the reality of the resources that are available for affordable housing in the United States,
Yes.
if you don't make it possible to go for the most important critical source, you're never going to get there. It's going to stay very small scale and at a higher income level. So you never quite get that diversity of levels. It's a sad reality. I wish we could be back in a different time.
What we have been doing is building, I think, very good small to medium-sized projects.
Mhm.
The Oliver project is partly market rate.
Mhm.
Large, it's
Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
beautiful projects.
Yeah, and that's in my view as big as that kind of thing should be, and that takes acreage, and we don't have a lot of acreage. I think there are sites that I'm aware of that it could take a 5-story building, and it would not be offensive to the eye if it's well designed. It would not be overshadowing neighboring properties, that sort of a thing. But those possibilities are it's a small number. It's figures on one hand, to my knowledge anyway. And my question then is, what suits the community in terms of the mix of incomes or the portion of the spectrum that we're dealing with? We've gone for LIHTC funds. There's a tremendous sacrifice in meeting those strictures.
I'm not sure if I'm
Yeah.
fully
Yeah.
seeing or agreeing, but
Yeah.
I would say, for one thing, I've never seen a community that proactively was able to convince everyone that all would be well
Oh,
in the
yeah,
path
no,
they're going. I mean, we're all
No,
spend
that-
our lives
I'm
adapting to change.
not utopian.
Yeah, yeah.
To that extent, but
And in my experience, you just survive through it, and people see the benefits off the forward end. It's a tough struggle. I understand that within the community discussions. With respect to you have a lot of opportunities and going back to what Councilmember Schneider was speaking about, there's actually quite a lot of opportunity to build in a way that will just reinforce all the wonderful things about Winslow as an area of the island.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a different vision there. I think the reality is we will not be able to accommodate the people in our region if we don't accustom ourselves to 5-story buildings. But they can be done in a good way and with a lot
No,
of
I do think
community
5
around
stories
them.
can be done in a good way.
Yeah.
I do think three stories is another option because we have available infill opportunities. But they will need to be subsidized probably with our own funds. But we have this trust fund balance that is growing, projected year by year, and we're not using that money. And
At the scale that you need to build, you'll have to, and the scale at which, at the pace at which that's building, you'd have to squirrel away a number of years of seed capital before you get to a scale to really bring in the big dollars.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yes. I've gone on and on, and I'm sorry, but this is, I don't have much more time left in this spot. So, Councilmember Fantry Johnson, and then back to Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Well, just a couple comments. I actually appreciate what you're talking about, John, and I think it would be a real shame for us to not continually be looking for all of the little opportunities. And what we're talking about strategy is a strategy conversation that I would hope that we're having ultimately, and the Planning Commission is happening. And it looks a lot like what we had in the Affordable Housing Task Force report and the Affordable Housing Plan. I mean, it's all sorts of little things like you're talking about. And I think we should be working hard to nurture religious properties, developing the purchase of, actually, I think that is in your presentation, Tori. I know that you don't see it as, and it won't give us the most at one time, but buying up units here and there when a development comes in. I believe Becky Erickson, the city of Paulsbo did that, where they bought a couple of, I think, single family homes even in a development that was built when it happened. You get them here, we get them there, we build them over time. At least we're making some progress. And it actually is reflective of what the community's asked of us, which is to sprinkle the units throughout the community. Obviously, we also need to get some traction on larger developments every so often, but I would hate to see us not doing everything we can to just pull little ones in. But I just wanted to follow up on what Councilmember Schneider was talking about, if we want to take pressure off of the outlying areas of the conservation zone, that's what we need TDRs for, because those are going to get developed too. And if we don't do that, so that's something that we just keep percolating, and the Planning Commission is asked to eventually come back to, and it's something that we need to talk about. And I guess the other thing I would say is just that in listening to Councilmember Schneider's ideas, it feels like a lot of some of what you're talking about could be accomplished with other bonuses. There's density, but there are other development standards. And when we talk about overlays, we could have different types of overlays. The community is probably going to be a lot more interested in giving more density for the lower level units. When we get into encouraging 120% AMI, it's going to be hard to get traction on providing a couple of extra units for someone to produce one of those. But we do have height, we do have setbacks, we do have, I don't know what we could think of, but other things that we could do when we're encouraging the development or the building of units that are actually should somewhat price out for the developer. We're not asking for the kind of give that we're asking for, like an 80% or a 60%. So I just think that I love the idea of having the general concept, because I feel the same way about the lower level of affordability. Like I said earlier, I'd like it to be just about anywhere in Winslow. You'd have an overlay that if you are going to build 100% affordable housing at this level, you get this. We would just have, if you are going to anywhere in Winslow, if you're gonna provide an X percentage of the development you're already building at 80 or 100 or 120%, you get this. So we could have different flavors of that, where that concept of getting a broad coverage would happen. But they would look very different for obviously somebody building a 60% unit and a 120% unit.
Councilmember Fran Troy Johnson, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I like the analogy of the three-legged stool, you know, and what it really takes to do this. And I think for the city to try to pull this off, there have not been, you know, too many opportunities to have all three legs. And the one opportunity we have, is I don't think that we as a community are looking at the whole plan. You know, we've been stuck on just the low end of what we need to do for the Growth Management Act. And, you know, when we start getting to the higher end, it seems to me that we can, you know, we have tools, yes, and we've tried to throw everything we've had at this as far as offering developers different, you know, whatever you want, we can do it, setback parking, whatever. I don't see anybody rushing us to say, yes, I want to build this, you know, so it's a difficult thing. I do support throwing something else at it, Leslie, if you want to throw the overlay on it. I mean, throw whatever we have on it. But we have to look at this realistically, because no one area of this income is going to, you know, topple over the table. We need all of this. We need a mix of this. We can't think that we can take all of the pressure and put it on one area. It's just not going to work. And I don't know that the community understands that what we have is a range. We have a range of incomes that we need to fill. And if we look at it from what your slides were saying, trying to get the biggest bang for the buck, we don't have any more buck.
I'll say, yeah.
I mean, the buck that we've been trying to use has, you know, morphed into something entirely different. It's kind of like, you know, we're not focused enough on the big picture. We're not looking at all of the legs of this stool. We're not looking at the whole Growth Management Act. We're not looking at the range of incomes that we need to have done. But I commend us for trying. And I don't want to be, you know, the one to say that I really worry about what we're going to get.
I'm not sure if this is an answer, but I would say that, again, in looking strategically at what resources out there, yes, you're going for the whole range. You can't do it all at once. And one of the biggest bang for the buck in an economic development standpoint is having workforce housing. And so if you can go for those, if you can target the available sources of funding that are out there externally for that sector, the 50 to 80%, that gets you a lot, because it gets you, it's higher density housing. You do have to have that conversation within the community, and people have to adapt to that. But it also delivers potentially a lot of other community benefits and goods that you can put in there when you're using public, you know, influence and dollars to leverage that. So that's really my point. Yeah, it's overwhelming to look at the whole spectrum, but at the higher you go, the more you can do with policy the higher you go in income level, the more you can do with policy.
And I want to follow up just on one
Yeah, go
point
ahead.
that
Yeah.
the slide that you showed of the 7 years that it takes to get
Mhm.
that money. I
Mhm.
mean, that's an important, that's an important point that once you realize that money is out there, you're competing with everybody.
Yeah, to
get
clarify,
that.
that's 2 years for the external money. The whole
Oh,
spectrum of the
yeah,
project, from the
okay.
time you conceptualize it until you have people living there,
Right,
that's
it's
7
7.
years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're 3 years into that effort with the Winslow property.
I have one more thing to say. I was emphasizing infill and smaller scale projects in the earlier comments, but the big picture is tax increment financing
Mhm.
for a large scale planning process. The high school road district, the ferry district, whatever those possibilities will be, but those are 10-year,
Yeah, much longer.
10-year long projects, just getting it together. And we need to set our sights on that level, because that's where we will really accomplish a transformation for the better, with
As someone said,
housing that
Councilmember Ed Huplet said,
we
it's
need-
everything.
yeah, and commercial development as well. So there are great challenges ahead for people after I'm gone. And I'm going to be glad to be a little bit out of off the hot seat. But Councilman, City Manager King, do you want to add, maybe wrap things up?
I just, when you're ready to, we can go on to the next item.
Let's proceed to the third item, which is use of automated traffic safety cameras. Yeah.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, this item is intended to do a couple of things. We wanted to bring you a report on what we have found out about the use of camera enforcement for line cutting at the ferry terminal. And then with that, we also wanted to bring you a proposition and to see if staff should pursue additional work with regard to speed enforcement in terms of camera enforcement. These are not surveillance cameras. We could talk about the issue of flock cameras, but these are speed enforcement. And we are bringing the speed enforcement to you. As you know, we have some residents who have been communicating with we staff quite a bit, asking for additional traffic enforcement. And considering the size of our department, it is difficult to do. We'll start off with Chief Clark introducing this, and then he'll provide a presentation on the work that's been done.
Good evening, Council. Joe Clark, Chief of Police. Tonight, we're going to present information on the use of automatic traffic safety cameras here on the island and provide an update on our proof of concept project that was conducted over the summer for ferry line cutting. We'll also tell you why we don't recommend moving forward with that use of this technology at this time. However, there are other proven uses that are viable on this island. We want to provide you that information and some example locations where that technology would be useful. If there is interest, we would come back to council with an implementation plan and an authorizing ordinance at a future date. Sergeant Joe Festaya has been tasked with this project and put together this presentation, and he's going to provide you with information on that use tonight.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Council. Happy to be here getting to present. So I'm here to talk about automatic traffic safety cameras, which is a mouthful to say, and I might use a shorter term, but they all mean the same thing. So first, we're going to go ahead and talk about, here we go, to our proof of concept for the ferry line cutting cameras, just proving not to be a feasible use of the technology. After months of testing and revision to the camera locations, we were not consistently capturing line cutting with the technology we had out there. We also had an issue with the camera trailers obstructing the non-motorized users of the roadway in the area, obstructing some of the pedestrians and the cyclists, which was leading to potential bad results. And in order to actually enhance this to make it feasible, would require a great deal more cameras and permanent placements and pole cameras instead of the camera trailers that make it a lot easier to adjust. In short, there's just too many actions we have to capture with photo enforcement to be able to back up the violations we're seeing. You have to be able to capture a vehicle maneuvering into the ferry line. So coming southbound on 305 and east-west off Winslow, we have to capture them come into the ferry line. We then have to show that vehicle moved in front of another vehicle that was waiting in line, and there's a line at the time. And then finally, we have to track it all the way down to the ferry booth and prove that it did not go to the condos, the diamond lot, or go to get a poke bowl for lunch instead. So that's just not working out very well with the technology that's there, and the cost to make it work is just not a feasible option at this time. But moving on to the next portion, which is going to bring us to here. Speeding is the #1 complaint we receive from the community at the Bainbridge Island Police Department. We are a community policing organization. Responding to the needs of the community is paramount to our mission. For the last 5 years, speeding has been at the top of the list by a pretty good margin as well. So why would we look at using automated traffic safety cameras? They're recommended by the National Transportation Safety Board. The U.S. Federal Highway Administration data shows a 54% reduction in collisions in where we have cameras placed, and a 48% reduction in injury collisions in the areas with cameras. There are numerous places in Washington already using traffic safety cameras, including Kirkland, which saw a reduction in speeding by 50% in school zones where they put up their cameras. Seattle saw a greater than 50% reduction, watched their violations for speed after deploying cameras drop from 45,000 to 20,000 violations. And Poulsbo, where they have put up their camera at Viking Avenue New Fish Park, has not had any collisions since putting the camera up. Simply put, they're also just more effective at reducing speeding than police patrols. Man patrols for speed enforcement are difficult due to the nature of our roadways. We have limited shoulders, limited places for us to park and actually run radar. There's also a big amount of difficulty in actually maneuvering into traffic to catch a violator's speed. Oftentimes, we're creating a greater impediment to traffic by having to get in there with the lights and sirens on and weave around cars to do it. And we don't want to make the roads less safe enforcing speeds that way. We also have an average of 3 officers who are enforcing everything on Bainbridge Island at one time. That's 911 calls in addition to speed enforcement, conducting vacation house checks, doing vehicle unlocks, and all the other things we do for the community. So being able to task everybody to one area just to enforce speed is taking resources away from other higher priorities. So here's our technology. And how it works. As mentioned before, the camera system is not a flock system. It does not go to a national database. It is not capturing people's locations, their comings and goings, and timestamping who they are and what they're doing. It is not recording any information about the drivers or the passengers of the vehicle. The camera identifies the vehicle speeding, takes a series of images to show the vehicle at its speed, traveling through the area, and records the posted speed limit, the speed the vehicle was at, its location, its lane, and its direction of travel. It takes a picture of the license plate and the vehicle, which is then later reviewed by a person to make sure that we're not just automating the system and relying on technology. There is human verification to check to make sure that this is a legitimate violation. And under state law, again, we can only capture images of vehicles and license plates above a set speeding threshold. The recommended thresholds are above 6 miles an hour in school zones and above 11 miles an hour outside of school zones. We have leeway within those to set those to a reasonable margin, but those are the recommended set limits and are the ones used by other jurisdictions. Reduced fines are available for folks from low-income households, so there's not an undue burden placed on people who cannot afford to pay the fines. The cameras are impartial and eliminate potential bias towards the drivers and occupants. It is only assessing the vehicle's speed and what the vehicle is doing without reference to anybody inside. And the camera vendor does not collect a percentage of the fines. They do not make more money if we catch more violators on cameras. We pay for the speed camera units, and that's what they get. And the images of the vehicles and plates can only be used for speed enforcement, and they are exempt from disclosure to further protect privacy under the law. So in looking to identify possible camera locations, these are the 5 big factors that are under the RCW and ones that are good for us to look at. Areas that are frequently traveled by vulnerable users of the roadway, places where we have documented speeding incidents, places with rates of collisions, and places with near collision reports and reports of recklessly driven vehicles. We also need to consider the lack of feasibility of other mitigation measures. We could, of course, stop speed on Bainbridge Island by putting a series of speed bumps on every single road every 10 feet, but destroying the suspension of every car driving on Bainbridge is just not going to be a feasible thing for us to do. So the first location we were looking at is 9343 Sportsman's Club Road. This would be in the Sakai Intermediate and Woodward Middle School zone. The graphic you have here is from our speed data collection. Our parking enforcement officer brings the speed trails around, collects data constantly so we can study the problems we have on the island with vehicle traffic. So again, an area where we're going to have children and parents who walk, bike, or roll to school. You always have steady pedestrian cyclist traffic passing through this area. This speed data was collected between October 21st and October 29th of this year. During school hours, our average speed was 24 miles an hour with an 85th percentile speed of 28 miles per hour. It broke down according to the data of an estimated 500 plus speeding violations per day in each direction. Now, when we speak of 85th percentile in traffic engineering, the 85th percentile speed is the speed at or below which 85% of the drivers travel. Ideally, the speed limit and the 85th percentile speed kind of line up. That's what we're saying based on the speed limits. Safe for people to drive on that road. So if they're above the speed limit at the 85th percentile, we're looking at a potential problem. So that was the first one we looked at. The second, we have 4704 Blakely Avenue Northeast, which is our Blakely Elementary School zone. Most of the same concerns and issues that we have at the middle schools. And Blakely Avenue is the main arterial for vehicle access to the south end of Bainbridge Island. Speed data collected between October 9th and October 17th. We had a little bit higher average speed at 27 miles an hour and an 85th percentile speed at 31 miles per hour. That gave us an estimated 850 to 950 speeding violations per day in each direction on that roadway. Now, under the law, for camera placement, for every 10,000 population you have, you can place 1 camera outside of a school zone, park zone, or any of the other special identified locations. One of the spots we looked at was the 12,000 block of Miller Road. We have a speed limit there of 30 miles an hour. Collecting data in both northbound and southbound, we saw an average speed northbound of 37 miles an hour, 85th percentile 42, and then southbound an average speed of 40 with the 85th percentile at 46 miles an hour, so an 85th percentile of 16 miles an hour over the speed limit. This added up to an estimated 1,000 potential infractions per day at this location. So those are why we were looking at those 3 areas. Obviously the school zones, we want to make sure it's safe for kids, and Miller Road going more than 50% above the speed limit at the 85th percentile shows that we do have a problem there. So in implementation, part of what we are required to do is to conduct an equity study under the law. An analysis of the proposed locations must include equity considerations for livability, accessibility, economics, education, and environmental health. Our preliminary impact study reviewing these factors and looking at the areas we'd be possibly putting up a camera shows a positive net impact for these equity considerations. When we talk about livability, we're talking about things like environmental noise, traffic collisions happening where you live, accessibility, vulnerable users of the roadway, people who need special access to roadways being able to safely use those roadways. Slower speeds enhance both of those things. Economics, we look at the impact of who would be receiving violations in the area, offset by the cost if people got into a collision or got into an injury collision. While people will have to pay fines, the cost of some fines is far less than even one serious injury accident that occurs in the area, which these days can range easily into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then education, are we able to accurately target the people in the area to make sure they're aware this is happening? Because transparency and notice are very big factors here in doing this properly. And environmental health, slower speeds equal less emissions, less brake dust getting into the area, lower noise has a positive impact on the wildlife. And again, all of those are showing a positive net impact. So we'd be looking further in that to verify, but things look good there. And mentioning transparency, under the law, there's a requirement to post an annual report in the city's website, including the number of traffic crashes that occurred at camera locations. We'd also be posting the number of traffic infractions issued for each camera. The areas must be clearly marked by signs at least 30 days prior to activation to tell everybody that this is a photo enforcement zone. We would not look to move ahead without making sure we have good messaging and we're able to communicate fully to the community and the people who come to work here, live here, play here, that we're doing photo enforcement. So please slow down and avoid getting a ticket. This is an example of Pulsebo's annual report. This is their camera near Fish Park. Since they put the camera up, they did not have any collisions. And in 1 year, it wrote 1,896 citations in that one location. But state law is great, but we're a great community. We want to do better than the minimum required by law. Kobe's going to look to post additional notice on official city media and make sure that's accessible for people to be able to hear. We have access to the business license holder database, so we can send mailers to businesses to make sure the employees who don't live here have notice, hey, when you're coming to work, there's going to be speed cameras. I currently am one of the members of the racial equity team for the school, or for the city. And we've been utilizing the race equity toolkit to assure the concerns of impacted communities are going to be addressed. And we're going to continue working with the race equity team in React during implementation to make sure everyone's aware of what's going on and we can hear their concerns and address them the best way we possibly can. Beyond for fine revenue. Revenue from fines cannot just be used for whatever. It has to be used to fund traffic safety activities. Among those, it includes physical infrastructure to reduce speeds through road designs, improvements to safety for active transportation users, improvements to access and safety for road users with mobility, sight, or other disabilities. It can also be spent to help with the implementation of the Complete Streets approach, promoting healthy communities by encouraging walking and biking, improving safety with wider sidewalks, medians, pedestrian streetscape features, preserving community character, and road repair and retrofit projects. Some of these do seem to align with what we have on the board for council priorities. So if the council is interested in proceeding forward, here's just an outline of what the next steps would be. We'd be continuously receiving community input throughout the process. We'd be looking to have a city ordinance drafted and ratified by council. We could do that as early as February. After that, we'd go to vendor proposals and selection after an approved ordinance, installation and testing, city messaging and site preparation, and the placement of signs. Then we'd give the 30-day notice. And we're suggesting that in addition to the 30-day notice, we also do a 30-day warning period where people do not receive violations. They are getting a warning mailed to go, no, hey, we're serious. We put the signs up. We're really doing this. And in another 30 days, there's going to be a financial penalty attached to this. So please stop speeding. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Morawaki first, and Councilmember Hytopoulos.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Quitsland. A couple comments, great presentation. And the data is, I'm going to get into that in a second, is really fascinating to me. On the ferry cameras, I understand, I can see what your problem is. You have to have cameras up and down 305. You want to make sure that it's irrefutable that this person did cut, so I get that. But I've been asking all along, why can't we capture those who are in the ferry queue lane taking a right turn on the Winslow Way? That's 305 coming southbound, and too many people do it. And there are citizens. They're not people trying to, visitors. Well, maybe it might be, but mostly I would suspect they're citizens or people familiar with our area. And the reason why I'm really keyed about this, that's the careful word I use, was that I've witnessed this myself when I've tried to get on the boat, and I'm just, near at the end of the queue, I can tell. And when two cars turn right, that sensor reads no car going underneath the light, and so it turns red. I would have made it had those cars gone straight. And how many people have we inconvenienced or made it difficult for them because these people are making illegal right turns? I mean, we've just got to get out of that habit. If there's some way we can have that traffic camera do that, it would seem to me not that difficult. You'd have one camera facing northbound on 305 and then one on the westbound on Winslow Way, so you capture a car turning right and capture it going down the road. So I hope we could at least consider that as a possibility. And on the speeding, this is fascinating. You know, the speed limit's 30 and the 85 percentile is 46. And then on the other one, that was for Miller Road, and then Sports Blakely. The average speed limit was 25, 85 percentile 35. There are those who would say, well, that's what the average people are doing. So maybe you should raise the speed limit 5 miles per hour and they'd be going on 35. And we all know if you raise the speed limit 45 miles an hour, they'd be going 40. It would not really change, you know, in terms of trying to, so I think this is really responsible data. I think and I also like one other point. We do have limited service, 3 units at the best at one moment. And that's pretty good for our island, but there can be difficult times. And traffic safety is important, but for a lot of things on our island, it's not necessarily a higher priority. And if it can be done automatedly, and if Paulsville had 1,000 violations in a short period of time, how many tickets can a cop write in a year? So seriously, I think this is an interesting idea. I would really like to move forward on it.
Councilmember Hytopoulos and then Mayor Matthews.
Yeah.
Go
Well, I want to say that I have absolutely no doubt that there's a real problem. I live near Blakely School, so I was not at all surprised by that and horrified by driving there. And as a general rule, in certain circumstances, most circumstances, whatever those are, I would be supportive of moving forward with this. I'm kind of torn. I don't think I would be open. I thought I would come here today and say I'm just not open to doing this at this time for various reasons, and I'll say why. Maybe a slightly different approach that didn't start with an assumption of what we're going to do, like so that we have it laid out that, you know, we're going to draft an ordinance in February, but really allowed the community to have a real conversation might help. And then we could learn how receptive the community is. My concerns are, even though I know and believe that these will not be used for the purposes that people are afraid of these days, I think that's going to be hard to sell to people. I think there will be people who will assume that no matter what we say there are, and there'll be a lot of people we don't easily reach who don't even hear enough to hear us explain why they aren't being used for those purposes. And so given the time that we're in right now, and I think there's a fair amount of dissatisfaction in the community right now, to be frank, with the city as well, I don't think this is a time to rush into and impose the cameras. But these are really a serious, obviously public safety issue that's out of control. So perhaps I would be supportive of something that was a softer roll into this, where there were some real conversations in the community. And we could really then kind of come back and ascertain, is the bulk of the community in favor of this because of this public safety concerns? And we feel like we've reached enough people to properly reassure them that the camera images wouldn't be kept, et cetera, and wouldn't be sent to inappropriate authorities. That's kind of where I am right now. So kind of torn.
Mayor Matthews.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So on my bingo card of things that I didn't expect ever, Sergeant Fastia, you were like A+ level presenter. That was really, really amazing presenting. Just well presented, clear data, engaging, just really great job. So thank you so much for taking the time. I agree with Councilmember Hytopoulos. This is a tough one. For me, I think I've heard and seen emails going back to like 2017, 2018 from the Miller Road residents who have just been trying everything. They've been trying to reach us. They've been basically going through every single avenue. And so I don't know if that would be a slower way to like only do that small segment and start there. I would be comfortable with that, maybe exploring and seeing what the community thinks about that, and definitely having this conversation at a business meeting where we could get comment and hear what the public thought. But definitely Miller Road, I know they've been looking for some relief, and if there's a way to start maybe there and see. But yeah, but thank you so much.
Councilmember Fantroy Johnson and then Councilmember Schneider.
I need more information. That's what I need. Because there's just a lot of open-ended questions, like who is your vendor? What's their record with bias and privacy? I'm kind of worried of putting one of these at schools because I don't know if some of our citizens are, would be afraid then to drop their kids off. And when you say that we're only taking a picture of people and the license plate, that information from their license is going to a database. You got a human in the loop where you said they're reviewing, but who's reviewing that? REACT's response wasn't in the packet. And I don't have a problem with, and I agree with the mayor, the Miller Road. We should have something there. We should have something there that tells people they're going too fast, first of all, and that, you might get a ticket if you don't slow down. And I'm wondering about, all of these numbers of violations that you show. In school zones, it's 20 miles an hour, right?
Mhm.
So you're catching people at 24 and 27 miles an hour? Is that what I saw?
Up to the 85%.
No, I'm not talking about the 85 percentile. There was on the slide, it said 24 miles and 27 miles.
Sure. So talking about the numbers on the slide there, we have an overall average speed, and then we have the 85th percentile speed, which I brought up because that's the traffic engineer metric for comparing to speed limits and going, hey, are we driving safely on this roadway? As far as the potential violations, looking at the data that was pulled from the speed signs that we had put up to collect the data, that's the total number of people who would be above a photo enforcement threshold set at 6+. So once they're hitting 7 miles an hour over the speed limit in the school zone, those are how many people we, in that data collection period, we're seeing go above that in the school zone during school hours.
But at what point do you ticket? If I'm going 24 miles an hour?
No,
My-
we'd be ticketing you at 27,
Oh,
27 or greater. So
20,
we give
okay.
you 6, and then 7+ is when, yeah, you'd be getting a ticket for that.
okay.
Those, of course, can also be adjusted. So those are not set in stone. There's just national guidance on kind of recommended levels those are set at. And the other jurisdictions we looked at and the other municipalities, those seem to be the levels they've selected for what they've been doing with their photo enforcement.
Okay, and it looked like you looked at how many drivers
Yes.
might be going over. But did you look at how many drivers actually went over in the school zones?
We did those, the speed signs are recording how many people are going over that number, and the potential violations I put up there were the people over the threshold for the photo enforcement violations. So in the data, you'll see the total amount of people over the speed limit, and then the possible potential violations per day are the people who would be getting a ticket through a photo enforcement system.
And hopefully we're getting a new policeman, right? Somewhere along the line here. I thought in our budget.
We're restoring an authorized position.
Yeah, so we'll have another person on duty. I think with that amount of people who are going over the speed limit, yes, we need to do something about it, but I don't like the idea of the cameras at all. I think it's going to be, I need more information about what.
I hear you about.
And I know the community is going to want more information on this also. So I don't support moving this forward until I have more information.
Councilmember Schneider and then Councilmember Dietz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also just want to say that your presentation was great. I really appreciate it. I also agree that we need to have a bunch of community outreach, education before we roll this out. That said, I am hugely in favor of doing this. I've been seeing the Miller Road emails coming in, and so many efforts of alternative traffic slowing and whatnot have been attempted just in recent months. And I mean, my sense of why it's happening is because the road is long and straight and probably a little too wide. And so, and it's a bypass, you know, from 305. And so you've got, you know, people using it as a shortcut or just a way to get around traffic and big trucks rolling by. I mean, I've been on a bike when a big truck has just been inches from me screaming by. And these residents that are emailing us are fearful of pulling out of their driveways. So, you know, that said, we need to be sure ourselves and we need to educate the communities that are going to be most affected by these first few implementations, and find out what it's going to take to convince them that, you know, their privacy is not at stake here. That, I mean, we're in a new world, and who would have thought, you know, even a year ago that we'd be where we are right now. But I do believe that there are safeguards that can address these concerns. So we just need to have more of that out in the public and being ready to listen to people. So I'm very much in favor. And this is going to happen. It's just a question of whether we do it now or later, whether we do it well or too fast. I really do believe this is what we need to do. Thank you.
Councilmember Dietz.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Sergeant, for that. Again, I'll just echo, great presentation. And now my understanding, and I could stand to be corrected, but this initiative kind of came out of the Miller Road speeding issue. It was something that myself and others have been quite aware of, and I'm sure the police department is as well. And certainly in my case, and I think Mayor Matthews, I think you actually went to the site, and it was very obvious if you're the house we were at, cars are going very, very fast on that road. So this initiative, again, came from that particular issue. And if we ask ourselves, what are we here for, is to solve issues of safety for our constituents. This is a perfect case of that. Now, that being said, you know, issues of privacy have to be taken seriously. And I do see, we have the advantage of the city of Poulsbo did this. They're kind of about a year ahead of us, thereabouts. And maybe what I would say, since our next door neighbors was, I'm not sure how much conversation we've had. I know on the council level, we've talked with them about this, but maybe having some, what were their lessons learned as far as, clearly education is a huge issue, hugely important to make sure that people are aware what the reason of this is. One, also that this is not a money-making initiative. It is, any revenues go to traffic safety, but also, you know, so privacy, revenue generation, and the fact that we're doing a problem solving. But I guess my point being is, I'm leaving at the end of this year, but I would suggest that we check with our colleagues in Poulsbo and see what lessons have they learned that we can apply to be successful in this. So thank you.
Councilmember Morawaki and then Councilor Hytopoulos.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And it was a great last words, Joe, because you basically stole everything I was thinking about. But seriously, I'm looking at this chart and it said there were in Poulsbo 2,281 violations, but they only gave 1,895 violations. I was one of those 2,281 violations. I'm coming back from, as we do, you know, go to Bremerton for meetings, Kitsap Transit, and I come down Viking Way, and it takes that right turn to go up toward Bond, and I didn't stop fully, and so I got this warning saying I didn't stop fully. Now, to me, it was like all the cars are stopped and there's nobody. Just go. But it was nice as a warning. But let me tell you, the picture was tiny. My car was like this big. I couldn't make out. You sure that's my car? But, you know, they obviously have high resolution. They can focus in on and enhance the license plate. So, I mean, I couldn't even tell that it was my Chevy Volt. It was very hard to see. from that picture that they had of me. And as I understand it, let's say you're doing and by the way, your articulation, Councilmember Dietz and Councilmember Scheider, about the safety of the people, these are people who, we live in an area where we have these wonderful roads that people go on, but they have to get out to their mailbox. They want to walk their dogs and just simply go walk down to see their neighbor. And this is a time when we actually should leave at least shoulders on these places. That would leave some bit of safety. But most of these places don't even have a shoulder. They're just a fog line and there's a ditch on the side. So this is a way at least we can do something substantive to give them some piece of safety. There's going to be people who speed and they'll get a ticket perhaps, but more of that, if they get that, is that you get a behavior and people will stop doing that. But if your graphic, it was the one graphic that showed the camera. So it starts, you said typically if it was a school zone, if you're at 27 miles an hour, that's when it would kick on. So all the cars that are going 26 miles and under, the cameras are just waiting for someone to break this barrier.
Yes, sir.
And right. And then it goes through, so you have enough time to measure the distance. And then you get a picture of the license plate. It seems pretty, in most cases, like I mentioned, I couldn't even make out my car in the violation picture. So it really is doing its job over there in Paulsville. And I like the approach that the police department did. I think it was very wise. Well, state law allows it, as you understood. We could put it in school zones and places of interest. I think the idea of school zones is a priority. I mean, these are children. They should be slow there. And Miller Road, I think we've all gotten the emails and met the individuals. I've gone out there. And yeah, I remember meeting one person out there and there was the, 42-mile, 45-mile car just zipping down by. And they said, you see? Okay, yeah, case closed, So thank you for all your work and I hope we can get this going soon. But I do agree with my colleagues that people should be informed about why they were doing this and why it's so important for our public safety. And it's also for your neighbors. Your neighbors deserve to have a safe neighborhood to walk in. And we have to do what we can to make sure that we keep those roads safe for them.
Councilmember Hotopoulos.
Well, I don't know if the city manager is actually ascertaining how many of us are saying maybe something like this versus we're going to inform the community why we're doing it. So I am definitely not in favor of informing the community why we're doing it. One comment I was waiting to, one of the couple comments I was going to make was that what was compelling, what caused me to kind of shift from, no, not now, we can't do this, was the stats from particularly school zones, because those are going to, those should grab people, especially like Blakely was particularly horrific with it. What was it? It was 31 was the 85th percentile. That's disgusting, right? So what I do think is if we're going to do outreach to the community, that we lead with those stats, obviously, because the question for the community is, this is what's happening, especially in school zones. I'm sorry, but I emphasize the school zones because most of us on this island live on streets that people are zipping by and it's hard to get out driveways. That's kind of par for the course on Bainbridge. I'm not saying we couldn't put Stan Miller, but what I find most compelling is the school zones. That's just a blatant violation of a very clearly understood speed limitation. So we go to the community and we say, hey, this is what's happening. What do you want to do about it? Is it worth taking the risk that you perceive that we're reassuring you aren't going to happen in order to take care of this or not? That's the conundrum. And I just want to follow up on some questions that were asked that I think that that you didn't have a chance to answer yet, Sergeant. That was like the processing of these. Aren't they presumably happening in-house? I hope you guys would be. You're not sending these off to some clearinghouse.
Yes, we would be processing these. I intend to answer a short list of questions I've got from you all here. I just wanted to hear all of the discussion first, and I'll go down my list.
I'm sure you can give us some reassurance on a couple of those key issues as to have the safety of this.
If we could, maybe we can respond to those. And I will say, yes, I'm just being humorous. It is confusing to hear what the council collectively would like to do. You've been very articulate, making individual statements, but you do rule collectively. So after Sergeant Festaya provides the information back with no final action, rather than, I guess, what the next steps would be, maybe you could formulate what your direction would be.
Thank you, sir. So going down the list of what I can give you a definitive answer for today, that was part of the discussion. why we're not able to enforce the wrong turn on Ferry. That is not a violation we're allowed to use photo enforcement for. So as much as it would be great to be able to use a camera for the wrong turn, that's not on the list of violations you can use photo enforcement for. The pictures that people receive in the mail, people reviewing these get a much larger, much higher def picture. So the human review process gets a much better image than what's actually sent out in the mail, or I think they're just trying to save ink and cost on that when people are receiving those violations. February date is not something that has to be set in stone. I'm just saying that's about the amount of time I would need to have some very crucial conversations with people to be able to review possible ordinances. So that is not a hard time frame at all. And I very much agree that keeping the community involved and being able to speak to everybody about their concerns is a paramount thing. Transparency and meeting the needs of the community. Part of this, yes, has to do with Miller speeding problems. That is a noted zone where we have an issue and have problems being able to do other enforcement. Brought up just man patrol. So sending an entire patrol squad to the school zone to write speeding tickets within about a 2-hour period of time, best we're able to do is about 5 or 6 violations in pulling into traffic and actually stopping cars. And that's before we get pulled off to a 911 call. Breaking down the school hour stats, I mean, there's like 150 violations occurring, and we're able to handle a very small percentage of those as compared to the system. So it's just a more feasible approach to that. Down. As far as reviewing the reviewers, there is the ability to audit all of the violations. I mean, they are there and they're going to be reviewed by our department and reviewed by the court when they actually process the violations. So there are multiple levels of review to make sure things aren't getting missed. And that robust review is why when you look at the stats from Paulsbo versus how many violations were captured versus how many violations were written, if we cannot clearly meet the elements of the speeding charge, it doesn't get sent out. It's not a let's see what happens, see if they pay it. It is, no, we don't feel good about this one. It does not clearly meet those elements. We're not sending that violation to somebody. Better to let that one go than to charge somebody who does not deserve a fine. So it's more of the process and how that works. And I think that's about what I've got.
Yeah. Is there any interest in a motion? We have a recommended motion in the packet.
I'm not going to make a motion, but I think I want to tell the city manager how I feel about the whole thing. I thank you for answering most of the questions that I had. I think I would like to know more about the process. See, I was under the impression that it was going to be a vendor, like with the other, I can't think of their names, but you're saying this is going to be in-house. And when the pictures come in, you or someone else is going to, I'm not going to tell you your process. Tell me what you're going to do.
Sure. So what that looks like is, yes, we use a vendor for their technology and their camera and some of their software to be able to record pictures and the violations. Those then get reviewed by members of our department and then approve violations after those are reviewed or sent to the court for the mailing of fines and dealing with payment of fines. So yes, we're using a vendor's cameras and yes, we're using software from the vendor, but we are the ones that review it and it goes to our court to handle everything else from there.
And they don't keep a copy.
No, they do not maintain a copy of that. It's maintained on software, but they are not keeping their own database of plates. This is not a system where you can flag plates for other things and you cannot use it for other methods other than the enforcement purpose of the photo enforcement for speed. That data is not given to other databases and not shared.
Through the chair, perhaps just have a little discussion about flock camera systems have been in the news. What is a flock camera system and how does this is different from a flock camera system?
Sure. So flock camera systems are network databases that you can log in information to the National Criminal Information Center, and you can put in hit lists for stolen vehicles, or if you're looking for a suspect in something, flock cameras can flag license plates of, hey, this is a vehicle someone's using, and it can be connected to national databases and things like that. That's a very different system that is more of a government intrusion than something for photo enforcement. I'm not an expert on the flock camera system, but we have no interest in doing that. And that is not something our community has said they have any interest in us pursuing. And this is a very different kind of technology. we're talking about the safety of school zones and children. We're trying our best to leverage the technology we have available to where we have a department of an average of 3 officers on the road. How can we best achieve that goal of safety? And we have a technological tool that's available that would let us do that much better than we can currently. And that's primarily where our interest is at. It is a fantastic force multiplier for a small rural department in a great rural town, and we would like to be able to meet the community's needs, which have been consistently, please stop the speeding.
Is it possible to do like a pilot and do Miller Road as a pilot so we could see, you know, we have some kind of experience with it? And
Through the chair, one of the options without any further direction that I would consider is to have a date in February to bring a report back to the council. Elements would include public engagement information, a more specific targeted location, including the Miller Road. I hesitate to, we did not reach out specifically to anyone on Miller Road to let them know this presentation was going to be brought to the council. That was to avoid unduly, for lack of a better term, pressuring the council, because that particular constituency has been very vocal. But to summarize, to bring back a more complete package of how we would address public comments, if there is a targeted location, allow you for further discussion. In previous discussions informally about this, the council has expressed that the school zones were your priority. So, you know, we've heard mixed pieces up here now about school zones versus other locations, but this is the first impression that you've had. Let's let it sit for a couple of months and then bring back a report to you with that. We want to accomplish 2 things. We want to put a period on what our work has been over the summer with the camera enforcement related to line cutting. It just doesn't work for us. That's unfortunate. We were hopeful that it would be. We want to lobby for additional state funding for humans there to try to address that. But with regard to going forward with camera enforcement for speed, let's work together, work on a report and bring that back to you at a business meeting in February. It won't be the final discussion, but and maybe by that time we can sort out a little bit clearer direction the council would like to take. Unless you can come up with a better motion than that.
Councilmember Hytopoulos and then Councilmember Schneider, and the mayor as well. Sorry.
I'd be happy to make a motion with that there's traction, but because of what I want to be clear on is if we go with what you're saying, city manager, is I'm just trying to understand how much we would be hearing that this is the outreach and what we gathered already, and we wouldn't be impacting that, because I would want us to do like a City Connects kind of roll out, like maybe an open house where you could come and use your fabulous skills to, you know, to educate, that sort of thing. And then we move towards a pilot project, right? So I just want to be clear that if we say, sure, exactly what you just said, Blair, it's not going to come back, that we already talked to everybody.
Right, the working assumption through the chair would be, we wouldn't necessarily engage in community outreach at this point in time, other than perhaps communicate with Miller Road, because they're communicating with us nearly weekly, and I'm not exaggerating. But that we would bring back to you a plan of how we would communicate to the public and what we would look for and how we would test this with the public. We wouldn't necessarily do any work before that. But also part of one of the biggest reasons is going through the holiday season is to allow you some time to think, and we don't want to, no one's being pressured into any decision. We have some time. We want to present this as a tool for public safety and want you to collectively think how you would like to respond, and perhaps listening to the police department can think of some different options. But the bottom line is we would not be engaging in public outreach until we had the opportunity to present you a plan for public outreach.
Actually, I don't know. Thanks.
Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you. I'd be happy to make a motion that's different than what's in the packet. I move to direct the city manager to present for council consideration at a future business meeting, a public engagement plan for discussion.
Is there a second for that?
For
Does-
feedback from the community regarding photo enforcement of speed zones.
Second.
Okay. This is a motion. I move to direct the city manager to present for council consideration at a future business meeting a public engagement plan for council consideration. Is that correct?
Yes, with all the specific
Okay.
that got it.
Consideration for the use of, I'll just use this land here, automated traffic safety cameras for enforcement purposes.
Okay, yeah.
That's the last part of the original
Yes.
motion.
Um,
But that's my amendment.
Discussion, any further discussion? Mayor Matthews?
So in just thinking about what the public could say and what they may say and unintended consequences, I think back to when I moved here, Miller was what, 40, something like that. And folks still consider it that, you know, it's sort of the wild, wild west out there. And I think of my neighbor and friend Walt Hannon, who owns Walt's down in Linwood Center. And lots of goods and services travel that road, you know, lots of purveyors and delivery trucks, all to get to Linwood Center, go that route. And when we first changed the speed limits I don't even know how long ago that was now, a couple of years ago, he was getting increases in delivery charges for companies changing their rates because of the increase in time. So like, these are just some things that we, I think, need to think about also that folks might say as we go forward. So that was just the other side of it.
Great. Shall we call the question on the motion? All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. And for committee reports. Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Sergeant, for the presentations. Councilor Morawaki for.
Thank you. Just a real couple quick things. I saw Mayor Ashley Matthews and I hope some other council members were there, but at the wonderful festivities at our Green here in the illumination ceremony, I guess, for lack of a better term, and the city manager gave a speech there. I just got to give a big shout out to our city staff for the work that's been put in for the decorations and the lighting. You know, we just show up and the lights are on, and I know Shannon had a lot to do with this, and I forget his name, but he's in Public Works and Sam, anyway, he told me of all this effort he did. They first plugged in the lights and they broke the breaker. And, you know, the lights didn't work. This is on Saturday. This is happening that afternoon. And so he went out there and he found another breaker and he put it in and found a different system. It took him about an hour to troubleshoot and jerry-rig this thing, but there it is in person. And we just don't even know that kind of backstory stuff that happens because we have hardworking people that make all this magic happen. So I just think I think it makes our community look great. And it was a lovely, perfect night. No wind, no rain, crisp but cold. And so that was a great event. And just one other announcement, I went to the this morning Kitsap Transit and of course Kitsap 911. And the Kitsap Transit Board voted me as the vice chair for the next year for the transit agency.
Councilmember Deeds?
Oh, great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Let me see. This is my, I haven't been here since October, folks, if anyone was noticing. So it's good to be back. Where have I been? I've been to Poland and Ukraine and had the privilege of taking part of a Washington State trade mission to Ukraine. And I'll talk about that a little bit next week. This Thursday, the SR 305 working group is meeting. I'm not sure, Mayor, are you part of that too? Okay, so we'll be there. And then this Saturday is my last and final office hours. After 8 years of having office hours, I have one more. So folks, if anything left you want to tell me, this is your chance. So look forward to seeing anyone come. Thank you.
Couple of things that are in the rest of the week on my schedule. Just for information's sake, tomorrow evening, I'll be going to Grace Episcopal Church to meet with others to discuss the options and possibilities of housing development on the Grace property. Nothing is definite at this point. We're just gathering different people's opinions, and I'll provide some information if I can. On Thursday, the Planning Commission will have the first of 2 remaining meetings this year, and this will be a substantial meeting. Follow it if you are interested. I hope my fingers are crossed in terms of the ground that will be covered and how they will resolve things, but there are difficult decisions to be made in some order. So it'll be close to the end of my time as a liaison, but I'm looking forward to involvement there. On Friday, I'm going to Bainbridge Performing Art, no, to BEMA, to the auditorium, for music provided by 2 young musicians, grew up on Bainbridge Island, Wes Corbett and Simon Krisman. This is going to be banjo. Well, I can't describe the music ahead of time, but 2 very interesting musicians with a lot of talent. Grew up and studied in this area, traveled around. Councilmember Schneider and Mayor Matthews.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Race Equity Advisory Committee for the workshop that they put on the Saturday, the 22nd, 5-hour workshop. And Deputy Mayor, you and I were both there for the entire time, as was the sergeant who was just here. So I had the pleasure of sitting at a table with him and really enjoyed getting to know him a little bit better. And then the KRCC, Kitsap Regional Coordinating Committee, the Transportation Policy meeting was kind of a shocker. Finding out that we're not going to actually have a project selection cycle this coming year. So, yep, probably we will move to make it a 3-year cycle so that we're back on track after that. But there's just the timing and the shutdown and various other things made it so that there really just was not enough time to know what money was available and being able to pull everything off with time to get this done. So I don't think I've ever been in a meeting where that kind of news came in, and it was a Puget Sound Regional Council. Kelly McGurty came to that meeting in order to break the news to us. So anyway, consequences. All right, thank you.
Mayor Matthews.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So quickly today, Super Tuesday, spent the day mostly in Bremerton, and this morning we had our Kitsap Public Health District board meeting, and then this afternoon was KRCC, and both dedicated a good amount of the beginnings of the meetings to really recognizing outgoing Poulsbo Mayor Becky Erickson and all the work that she's done on boards and for the communities and over her long tenure as mayor in Poulsbo. So just wanted to give her some kudos and recognition on her retirement. And then we have the Kitsap, Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board meeting this coming Thursday. And so I look forward to hearing more about the lack of transportation dollars.
Councilmember Marowak.
Quick dovetail. Thank you, Mayor Matthews, for that reminder. Sat next to outgoing Mayor Erickson at Kitsap Trenton, 18 years on that board. And for her, they gave her a fare box from an old bus, where you put in coins and money and stuff, and they painted it and they put a plaque on the front and polished it. And her only complaint was it was too damn heavy. Oh, and Saturday I'm going to go to Association of Washington Cities workshop because reelection, it's for mostly newly electeds, but we have to do this every time you're elected again to go learn about city governance 101 and ethics 101 and all that stuff. So going down to the state capitol.
These things having been said, I'll now declare the meeting adjourned.